Welcome to Travel Devil. I'm your host Clara Francken, and in a world full of mass tourism, we're here to talk about unconventional travel. Let's get into it. The world's richest country made public transport free. Today we're talking about Luxembourg and its buses, tramway and train system. This is great for the environment, it's very practical and reduces the amount of traffic which was going to the capital. I'm joined today by a Luxembourger, Joé, to talk about how this change started and how successful it is and more. Joé Voncken, welcome to Travel Devil.
Yeah, hi there, Clara. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. Joé is not only a friend of mine, he's also a Luxembourgish guy, tour guide in Luxembourg, and he also has a PhD in history at the University of Luxembourg. Joé, do you want to introduce yourself first to my listeners?
Sure. Yeah, so as Clara said, I'm Luxembourgish myself, born and raised in Luxembourg, one of the few, they like to say. And then I went abroad to study in Germany, like so many other Luxembourgers do as well. And while in Germany, I started working as a tour guide, among other things, in Bamberg and Leipzig. And I'm still doing that in Luxembourg as well, besides doing a PhD, because as you can imagine, doing a PhD, it's a lot of dusty archives, it's a lot of research. So interacting a bit with tourists, seeing how they see my home country, it's pretty fun.
Okay. You're from Luxembourg? Luxembourg is pretty small, right?
It's very small, yes.
Can you give us an idea of how small Luxembourg is?
I mean, population-wise, it's just about the size of Leipzig, so we are talking 600,000 people.
Okay. And you were comparing it to Leipzig because I live in Leipzig, in Germany.
Mm-hmm. And the size, you can fit Luxembourg 11 times into Belgium.
Yes. And so Luxembourg is pretty small. That's also why you had to move abroad for your studies, I guess, because there's only one university here. You couldn't study what you wanted to study in Luxembourg. You had to go abroad.
I mean, it's more of a custom. Like the University of Luxembourg, it's very young and it's very research focused. So which I am very much enjoying now. But student life, going abroad, getting some fresh air, that's not what you do if you go to Luxembourg University.
There's no fresh air in Luxembourg?
There's a bit. There's plenty, but, getting away from your home country, it's good once in a while.
Yeah. And today we're talking about public transportation. Because in Luxembourg, the public transport is free, which I think is really cool.
You always have to differentiate between Luxembourg, the country, and Luxembourg, the city, because they are very different beasts. Like Luxembourg City, it has the tramway, which has also only opened in 2017, so also quite recent. And basically all of the transport means in Luxembourg, buses, trains, or the tramway, those are all free. It was made free rather recently, only 4 years ago. So it's even quite new to me.
Can you pinpoint a year on that?
Yeah, it started in 2020. After a long discussion, I mean, they were discussing this since the early 2000s, if I remember correctly. As a historian, I like to. I could, of course, delve further into that. But yeah, they started discussions pretty early on. And their main idea was also to make it free, so people would, of course, use cars less, especially use cars less to get to Luxembourg City.
I'm just thinking right now, maybe, could you give me a very basic introduction of the Luxembourg country and city?
Okay, so Luxembourg, you have the capital of the same name, you have the country, also called Luxembourg. It's a monarchy, it's a grand duchy, so it's actually the only grand duchy in the world. They always like to say it's very rich because of all of the. At first it was industry, then finance came here. Now it's one of the big financial centers of Europe. Also one of the European capitals because you have European institutions here. Luxembourg City, it's quite famous for big international companies that have their seat in Luxembourg, very often for tax reasons. So you have a lot of people coming from abroad to Luxembourg, either living in Luxembourg or coming just from across the border this mix, of well, let's say European institutions and finance industry being very, globalized, very multilingual in itself, means that you have a lot of people from all over coming here. If you grow up in Luxembourg, you speak Luxembourgish as a native language, then you learn German, you learn French, you learn English. In my case, you might also learn Spanish or something else. But there's also a bunch of Portuguese, people of Italian ancestry. And recently, of course, you also have people coming from outside Europe, like India, like China. Even the US and the UK are pretty well represented. So you have people from all over.
Can I ask you something on that? You say people are coming to Luxembourg because it's tax free. There's less taxes here?
Yeah, there's less taxes. There's quite a few tax deals between the Luxembourgish government and some companies such as Microsoft, Google, Steam, only to mention a few, even Amazon. If you buy a package from Amazon in the EU, it's going to have a Luxembourgish address on it because that's where it is.
Yeah, registered. I saw that when I order my packages, and actually, it's yes. True. Can we also talk about the measures which were taken to facilitate the public transport? So one thing is that it's gotten free, but if they want to make sure that there's more people traveling to Luxembourg, is it they only made it free, or did they also take other measures? And what were the other measures?
Yeah, so as I said, the tramway actually came, it was already created in 2017, so actually 3 years before public transport was made free. And that was also one of the main initiatives to really make getting around in Luxembourg City very easy. And it is very easy. It's generally speaking, it's very comfortable. It's it also makes it possible that you come by car to one of the big parking lots around the city of Luxembourg, and then you take a tram to get into Luxembourg City. They're still expanding parts of it. So there's still plenty of construction in Luxembourg taking place, but if you compare it to a few years ago, they really tried to streamline it to make it go as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So yeah.
And when we're talking about more constructions, specifically for the trains and the cross-border workers, does it also mean that there's more stations that are being built around the borders of Luxembourg?
There were plans to do that, but as far as I know, they did not go through with that. Instead, what they are doing is put more trains on the rails. So the trains are coming more frequently from, for instance, Metz, Thionville, Trier. So Metz, Thionville for France, Trier for the German side of the border, or even Arlon for the Belgian side. So you do have more trains being set up, but you don't have more stations. It's mostly just increasing the frequency, and the trains are also made more modern, more comfortable, with Wi-Fi capability, with places to charge your phone and that kind of stuff. So they really try to cater to this cross-border working population.
Okay, that's good to know. And wasn't there also, I might be wrong here, but weren't there also some stations which were built across the border in France?
It's quite interesting because you have the National Railway Agency of Luxembourg.
What is the name?
The CFL, Chemins de Fer Luxembourgeois.
Okay, en français.
Yeah, French. Exactly, yeah. Institutions are always, they like to stick to their French names, historically speaking. The CFL, they manage 2 train stations in France. One of them, they actually set up by themselves. Another one was meant to close. The French Railway Society company, they decided to close it down, and then the Luxembourgish government said, no, we should get involved in order to still be able to get these cross-border workers from that city to Luxembourg, and then they are managing it to this day. This is Audin Letiche in this case. Yeah.
Okay, so there are 2 stations outside of Luxembourg which are managed totally by Luxembourgish government, and they're in France.
By the Luxembourgish Railway Company, yes. Okay. Which is partially private, but mostly government-owned.
Okay. Is it partially private? I didn't know.
There's a bit of private investment in there. It's hard to say where exactly it comes in.
Because how does the funding work? Because at the moment, it was made as a public statement that everything should be free. But if it's partially private...
Yeah, but for the CFL, the private part is mostly the cargo and logistics, where you have that, for the transport of people, I'd say it's completely nationalized. But if we are talking about cargo and logistics, because Luxembourg, it's right between France, Germany, and Belgium. And even 150 years ago, when they were setting up the first railways, it was a big transit country. So you have a lot of goods, a lot of trains passing from Germany to France through Luxembourg.
The Amazon packages coming by.
Some of them, yes, for sure.
Some of them, okay. Okay, and when we're talking about funding, could you explain a little bit, go through the process of funding this? Because this is paid by taxes, I guess. It's nothing is really for free. Some people somewhere have to pay for it. Can you explain that?
It's entirely paid by taxes, paid by the working population of Luxembourg, which means not only Luxembourgers, but also, or not only people living in Luxembourg, but also people working in Luxembourg, because they are also paying their income tax for the most part in Luxembourg. And even before, one must say, if we're talking about the Luxembourgish transport before it was made free, it was already very, very heavily subsidized by taxes. You had maybe 5 or 10% of the whole costs of running the transport network paid by ticket sales. Just in many other places it's the same, but in Luxembourg, basically, they were it's so insignificant, this amount of money that we also get from these ticket sales, that we might as well cover it all by taxes.
Okay.
It was part of the reasoning.
Interesting. Okay. So how much was a ticket before the change? Can you remember?
I think that the last ticket price I remember paying was €2 for a short duration ticket.
For a train or for a tram or for a bus?
It's the same in this case. It was already standardized. You had a short-term ticket that was valid for up to 2 hours, and you had long terms for the whole day, which were, I think, €4 or €5.
4 or €5, and you could just use it. It's like a full day ticket then, in that way.
Almost, yeah. You also had full day tickets. I think I didn't ever take any of those, because also as a high school student, you would pay €50 to be able to use all the transport.
For a year or for a month? €50.
€50 per semester. Basically per 6 months. Yeah.
That's pretty cheap.
Yeah, it was quite nice. Although a lot of the time it felt like you didn't need it because controls were not as frequent as.
Okay, can we talk about that? Were you ever controlled before?
In trains, you would almost always get controlled. Also in buses in certain parts of the country. It felt like mostly in the parts of the country where you would have less people traveling every single day. Because you had to pass the bus driver, and he would ask you where's your ticket, and so that's basically that. Those were the only instances where I actually bought a ticket specifically, either if I was traveling in the north of the country by bus, or if I was taking a train anywhere in the country.
Okay, so I can assume that people who were taking the bus in Luxembourg City, or also as soon as the tram was driving, people didn't bother buying a ticket because there was no control anyway.
There were very, very, very rare controls. They were so rare that they were like an urban legend, the controllers of Luxembourg trains and Luxembourg buses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it means that some people still bought it very often, but the controls were really basically non-existent.
Okay. And so the main idea was also to make Luxembourg more attractive for people from outside to come to Luxembourg without a car, but also for the Luxembourgers to travel with less use of a car, I guess.
Yeah, and for cross-border workers, of course.
And for cross-border workers, because when we're talking about cross-border workers, I want to make a difference between cross-border workers and expats. Can you make a little difference over there? Explain a little bit more?
Yeah, Luxembourg has always experienced a lot of migration. Even if you go back 100 years ago, you already had plenty of people coming from Germany, Italy, France, Belgium, and so on. But in recent years, because you have so many international companies also opening up here, for instance, as I said, Amazon, Google, and so on, who want software engineers, and you're not going to find more than a few dozen software engineers among Luxembourgers, or at least among the people that live here. So people come from outside. They come from all over. There's hundreds of thousands of people coming from just across the border in France, from Belgium, from Germany, every single day. So you have to imagine, Luxembourg has 600,000 people living in it. You have another 300,000 people, so almost half of that, coming into the country every single day to work here. So in order to facilitate that, that's where you have all of these transport measures coming in, like free public transport, more highways, also train stations being expanded a bit throughout the country.
So could we say, like, if Luxembourg is filled with 100% of people during the day and then 50% leaves during the night?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can imagine that. I mean, they kind of got it under control now, but you have to imagine 20 years ago, before all of this public transport and so on, where every single person, every single one of these workers, all of them had to come to Luxembourg City, because Luxembourg City is the main place where you work, either as a Luxembourger or as a cross-border worker. So it led to this huge traffic collapse every single day. But yeah, even to this day, you can still see, if you walk through Luxembourg City during the day, it feels bigger than it actually is, because officially it only has a population of like 120,000. But during the day, it's almost double of that.
Wow. Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you already explained a little bit why Luxembourg is also dependent on the people from outside, because, well, there's specific jobs and there's not enough Luxembourgers for fulfilling that. But how do they make sure that, like, why are there so many people interested in even going to Luxembourg? Like, going from so far all the way to Luxembourg, or even cross-boarding workers? Why don't they work in Belgium, France? What is making Luxembourg so attractive?
I mean, taxes is a very big thing of it. But in this case, we're not talking about the corporate taxes, like that, for instance, Amazon has to pay or doesn't pay. But instead, we are talking about income tax. Income tax is very low in Luxembourg. So basically, you get a higher salary than across the border, and you pay less taxes on that. So very often, you get paid, let's say, 50% more for doing a job in Luxembourg than you would be paid to do the same job just across the border in Germany. So
basically, you're saying I should move to Luxembourg?
Of course, yeah. Right away.
Right away. I'm gonna earn some more money here.
Yeah, you're gonna stay on that couch, yeah.
Yeah. I'm moving in. Okay. You said that before this whole change in transportation, Luxembourg City was very filled with cars. Nowadays, people are parking outside of the border, but are there still a lot of people coming to Luxembourg City by car, or did it really make the big impact that Luxembourg City was hoping for?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. The problem is also they introduced free public transport in the middle of COVID, so 2020. So you can imagine a lot of people were very hesitant to take public transport. Sometimes it was not even allowed, really, or you had to, strictly control it. So it took a little bit of time to take off, but now every single year you have tens of thousands of more people using the tramway every day, or using the buses, or using the parking lots outside of the city. But again, I think a lot of cross-border workers, a lot of Luxembourgers that don't live in Luxembourg City but come to Luxembourg City for working, they still have to take the car to get close to Luxembourg City.
Okay, so there's still room for improvement over there.
Yeah, for sure. And they are still working on expanding the tramway network, for instance, to also connect other places of the city. Because you have like 2-3 main hubs in Luxembourg City. You have like a European quarter, you have the city center, and you have a new, big economic finance quarter as well. And to connect all of these three would mean to have most of the working population of Luxembourg taken care of.
Okay. Then another subject which really interests me, and which is important for this podcast as well, is sustainability, right?
Oh, yeah,
so I want to know also, of course, we all know that traveling by train is more sustainable than taking the car to go to your work or whatever. But Do you think this way of like this change is sustainable on the long term?
There's no, like in the past 2-3 years, you can see the successes a bit more. Like they're quite visible. That is because you do have more comfort of traveling around Luxembourg City. You have people really enjoying that and really appreciating that. Because 10 years ago, when they were debating, for instance, setting up a tramway in Luxembourg City, you had a lot of people saying like, no, it's just going to be construction works and then nobody's going to use it. Or what do we need that for? We have buses. But now almost every person that I know, or people that are also coming to Luxembourg from abroad, like tourists, like cross-border workers, almost everyone is happy with the tram and they want to continue seeing it grow and continue, because it's really the most comfortable way to actually get around a city, because you have these, it's just so easy to use and it's quite comfortable too. So generally speaking, it is a success. But of course, and they also have a lot of expansion plans for the next few years. So let's see where it goes.
Okay, you said that Luxembourgers weren't really like so happy about it in the beginning. Was it mostly the Luxembourgers in the city of Luxembourg, or was it just like a general Luxembourger thing to not really be pro this change?
I mean, I think sometimes it feels like complaining is a bit of a national sport for Luxembourgers, maybe in other countries as well. It's, I think I've heard it's quite widespread. But the main worry was really that because Luxembourg City, it's also a historic city. Like it is a UNESCO World Heritage. So you have a lot of, pretty small streets that can already not take on so many cars or buses. And then you set up a tramway in the middle of it. So that's where people were like, how is that going to work? What's that going to look like? And there was definitely some difficulty, especially while they were building the tram in the center of Luxembourg City. It was completely impossible to even drive through Luxembourg City by car for 2-3 years. So there was a lot of, I'd say that there was a lot of bother, like people were bothered by it, but mostly about construction. But now that it is actually set up, those same people are probably among the ones that use it the most. So yeah, it's.
Okay.
I think it's mostly a thing of the past.
Okay. I also have a question about like comparing the trains and the train connections in general. Is a train making it possible to travel everywhere through Luxembourg?
It's mostly a north-south axis that we have. So from the north, from the Belgian border, up in the far north of Luxembourg, down to the southwestern corner, where you have the French border, that's very easy to get around. So basically that follows the whole north, it goes to Luxembourg City, and then it goes a little bit to the southwestern corner. Those are basically the places you can reach very, very easily by train. The rest of the country is a bit trickier. So you have some railways that go to the west and the east too, but many of them have stopped working in the past 50, 60 years, and they are not really planning to put them up again. So you only have one railway, for instance, leading to Germany. You have one railway leading to Belgium, but you have two very frequent ones, very expensive ones going to France.
Okay.
And also a TGV. Like that, the difference is also if you want to go to Paris, you have very good fast train connections. You have a TGV, so one of the fast trains, French fast trains, running very often. But if you want to go to Brussels, it's almost the same distance, but instead of 2 hours, you need 4 hours.
I was gonna say, like, I traveled to Luxembourg from Brussels, and it was definitely a 4-hour ride. It was very slow. Yes, and I had to pay a ticket until the border, and then it was free as soon as I was crossing.
Yeah. I mean, they're planning to set up a fast train to Brussels as well, but that's going to take a long time. And if you go to Germany, it's also, I mean, you just came from that way, so you have made that experience just like I did during my 7 years studying in Germany.
Yeah, a little side note on that. Yeah, I was in Leipzig and I traveled all the way to Luxembourg now. And I think I was definitely traveling 9 hours on the train because I had to take multiple trains. And then it was like regional train kind of vibe. I don't even know if there's an ICE coming crossing the border. There's
not.
Only a regional train, right?
Yeah, but it is. If you come, for instance, from Koblenz to Luxembourg, it's one of the most beautiful train tracks of all of Germany because you're going along the Moselle River. It's extremely beautiful, especially in summer and autumn.
Yeah, it's true. It's a beautiful view. But if you want to be somewhere fast,
then it's not ideal, yeah. But I mean, once you're in Luxembourg, you're going to be able to get anywhere pretty easily, pretty quickly. But getting to Luxembourg might take a little bit longer than you would think looking at a map.
Then I also like to talk a little bit more about the experience in general. Because you said it's something pretty recent. It's only been 4 years since they did this change. Mm-hmm. Could you take me through the first time you were using the tram and the bus for free? What was that experience like? Like talking about urban transportation first. The first time you were like, oh, I don't have to buy a ticket. How was it for you?
I mean, in my case, to be perfectly honest, and I hope nobody's coming to find me retroactively. I never bought a ticket for for buses in Luxembourg anyway, except for the very few exceptions in the north. But it was still like it's one less thing to worry about, especially if you come from a city like Leipzig, where you get controlled quite often, for instance, because I did my studies in Leipzig, and you still always have to keep reminding yourself. Do you have your ticket? Is your monthly ticket still valid, or when do I have to renew it? That kind of stuff. And then you come to Luxembourg and you don't even worry. You just, you're hanging out with your group of friends. You're traveling through the city. It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. And I think it's one less thing, especially for people that come from outside of Luxembourg. For tourists, it's very nice because it's like it's this big. It can be a big worry. Transport or figuring out how to get around somewhere in a new place that you have never been to before. And in Luxembourg, you can really right away focus on where you want to get instead of asking yourself, where do I pay tickets? What kind of tickets do I get? And how much is it going to be also?
Yeah, I guess it's made it very easy for also visitors. I mean, the first time I was here and I was taking the public transport, I was somewhere in my heart, I was like, what if this information is wrong? What if I need to buy a ticket and somebody's coming to control me and I don't have a ticket?
Yes, what if tourists are excluded? Yeah, no, but it's free for everyone. So,
yeah. I feel like it kind of makes sense. When you know it, you know it. But when you arrive there and you don't know it yet, because I mean, I don't think this is like such a typical thing to know necessarily. Is there on every train a first and a second class?
Yes, there's still, for some reason or another, they still have first and second class. Yeah. I mean, if you want to do a super fancy thing, you go and buy a first class ticket. Be extra snobbish because you don't have to pay for ticket for transport, but you want to pay for transport, so you get that first class.
Okay.
So if it's for a short duration, you pay 3 euros. If it's for a long duration, you pay 6 euros. I'm not sure why people would do that, but you can if you want to. So yeah, there still is, and it's actually quite fancy. Maybe it is one of the Luxembourgish lifestyle things to do that.
The Luxembourg lifestyle thing to do. When you have money, you spend your money on first class seats.
You miss paying for public transport so much that you got to do it.
You gotta do it. You gotta do it. Okay, amazing. Maybe we should take the first class one of the days.
Every single time, yes. No more second class.
Okay, and now can we talk also about your first time taking the train, the free train?
Yeah, I mean, trains was nice, I would say, because it used to be quite a bother, because for a long time they had this app that was not really working, so you would have to actually go look for a ticket machine, and they were broken half of the time, so it wasn't very fun to get your tickets some 5 minutes before you're about to miss your train. So that was quite nice. And for me, what was nice on one hand and then confusing afterwards was when I went to a shopping trip to Trier in Germany. And you don't have to pay for the Luxembourgish part of the journey, but Trier is like 20 kilometers across from the border. So you will still ride for at least 20, 30 minutes to Germany. And of course, you have to pay there. But it's very easy to forget about that. So of course, every single time I went to Trier to do some shopping, I would forget to buy a ticket. But fortunately, the train personnel was very nice, very understanding. And they just let you buy it there with no additional cost. So
that's good.
That was quite nice. Yeah.
In Belgium, actually, when you there's a difference between when you don't buy a ticket by accident. Well, then it's your mistake. But if you proactively go to the person, like a controller, and you say like, "Hey, I forgot to buy a ticket," then you only have to pay like a smaller fee. I think it's like, I'm not sure, it's like €7 or something that you have to pay as an additional fee on top of the ticket. Whereas if you don't say anything and the controller comes to you and he's like, "Where's your ticket?" And you're like, "Oh, fuck." Then you pay like a bigger fee. Yeah.
I see.
Okay. And so we talked a little bit about the confusion with crossing borders and forgetting to buy tickets. Is there a place where you cross the border and you don't need a ticket? You talked about Trier in Germany, but there you need to buy a ticket, as I understood it, to cross the border to Belgium or to France. How is that?
For Belgium, as far as I know, it's like you have one last train station just before the border. You pay until that, and then you don't pay for the rest of it. For France, the two stations that I mentioned that are managed by the railway company, they are, by the Luxembourgish railway company, they're for free. But for the rest, you start paying from the moment, like they kind of calculate it from the moment that you cross into France. So you still do have to pay, but normally they are, it's quite flexible. Like you can buy everywhere in Luxembourg, you can buy these cross-border tickets for very cheap. They explain it pretty well, especially if it's just a day journey, like going back and forth. So that's like, like for instance, it's €7 to get to Trier and back. So it's not a huge amount of money, and it's also still pretty easy to use for the most part.
Okay. Fascinating. And you were mentioning a longer distance in Luxembourg. What would be the longest distance available to travel in Luxembourg without crossing the border?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky because as far as I know, short duration tickets, it's for up to 2 hours. And I'm not sure how you can spend more than 2 hours in a train in Luxembourg, unless we are really talking about, going back and forth somewhere. But even if you take the longest, the longest train line from the southwest of Luxembourg all the way to the north of Luxembourg, close to the Belgian border, I think that's about exactly 2 hours. So yeah, you can travel for longer, but normally short duration, short length tickets are plenty enough in Luxembourg.
Okay. Is it very reliable to depend on public transport?
Here, I think you really have to differentiate between Luxembourg City and the rest of the country, because there's still, there's a whole country outside of Luxembourg City too. And the
Luxembourg is in Luxembourg, to make it clear. Luxembourg City is the capital of the country Luxembourg.
Yes. It's also the namesake. It's basically the whole reason it exists. Yeah. The city is the reason the country exists. But that's another story. But so in Luxembourg City, it's very reliable. Like if we are talking about purely urban transportation, it's super reliable. Like you really have these tramways coming every 3 minutes. You have buses every 10 minutes. Until 11 or 12 in the evening. So it's quite good. Of course, for nightlife, it's a bit tricky at times. On the weekends, it's a bit longer. But if you want to get around in the Luxembourgish countryside, that's where it gets rather tricky. Because at that point, for most parts of the country, you rely on buses. And those buses, they're not running very frequently. So only every 2 hours or so. If, for instance, I'm talking about my my visits to my family, who lives in the east of Luxembourg, pretty close to the German border, there's only buses going there. So if I want to visit them on the weekend, I'd need an hour and a half by bus, sometimes more. And by car, we're talking 20 minutes max. So there's still a big split between countryside and urban.
Do you think when you want to get around in Luxembourg, you still need a car?
At times, yes, probably for the most part still. If I talk about my personal experience, getting to work, getting back from work, traveling somewhere for work inside Luxembourg, that's very easy. So if we're talking about during working hours, because we are again talking, this whole transport thing, it is catering to a working population who mostly the only time they spend in Luxembourg is during weekdays between 8 in the morning and 6 in the evening. So if you want to travel outside of these times, or if you want to travel somewhere a little bit remote, that's when it gets tricky. That's when you need a car, or when you need to wait for somewhat less frequent buses.
And are they planning on improving that?
I think in recent years, you have a very strong focus on Luxembourg City and on expanding the railway network. The countryside, the situation has actually partially gotten worse.
When you're saying expanding the railway network, you're talking about trains or trams?
Trains.
Trains.
The tram both of them are expanding to an extent. Again, for trains, it's only the frequency. For trams, for the tramway, they're actually building new stations, new stops that run through Luxembourg City.
Okay. You were giving the example before about your family, that if you want to visit your family, you actually need a car. Would you consider it an option to always take the public transport, or is it just too bothering?
It's a bit tricky. If the weather is really nice, basically, at that point you start getting.
It depends on the weather.
No. At that point you really start weighing your options, because it's like, do I spend 1.5 hours getting there and then 1.5 hours getting back, or do I just join my family a little bit quicker?
Because by car it takes how long again?
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
So it's actually.
So 20 minutes by car, or 1.5 hours by train? No, by bus.
By taking train and then a bus. Well, taking a train and then waiting for a bus that only runs every 2 hours on weekends.
Sounds like fun. Sounds like there's room for improvement over there, actually. Okay.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Now we're talking about visiting the urban areas and stuff, but when somebody wants to visit Luxembourg, we're not only talking about cross-border visitors, cross-border workers, but also tourists coming to Luxembourg. Maybe they don't necessarily need to go to see your parents.
I assume not, yeah.
So how is it how did this situation change the amount of visitors coming to Luxembourg? Did it make sure that more people are visiting Luxembourg? Is Luxembourg more attractive for tourists?
Well, speaking from my experience talking to visitors, tourists that I'm guiding around the country, or at least, well, I work in the south of Luxembourg City as a tour guide, so that's normally the places I focus on. It's this additional comfort, it's one less worry, and a lot of the touristic places in Luxembourg, be they in the southwest of the country, in Luxembourg City, because again, it's a UNESCO World Heritage City, because it's an old fortress city, in a way, with these big fortifications. Or if you want to go to the north of the country, where you have beautiful hiking trails and nature in general, those places are very easy to get to. And the Luxembourgish, I think the Transport Ministry, they also made it a priority that these places remain reachable. So for tourists, it's pretty good, I'd say. It seems to work quite nicely. Luxembourg is also multilingual, so all the information is also available in English, French, German, and Luxembourg is sometimes also Portuguese and Italian. So you will always find someone who can help you out, or you will have information in any kind of language.
Okay, so we could conclude that this change did improve the amount of visitors visiting Luxembourg.
I'd say generally speaking, yes. If we're looking at numbers, again, it's a bit difficult because it was introduced in COVID. And now last year was announced as a big boom year of tourism in Luxembourg. But probably there's some truth behind it because it does make it easier. I mean, you have traveled plenty. I have traveled plenty. It's nice to be somewhere where you jump into a train, and if it's the wrong one, you're still going to be back where you want to be in
within
20
hours, 10 minutes. Okay.
It's 20 hours? Yeah, you can try that.
20 hours traveling.
That's
I don't know how many times you would travel through Luxembourg for that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Could you give me an overview of the official languages of Luxembourg?
So the national language is Luxembourgish, but the administrative languages are German, French, and Luxembourgish. Everyone is so flexible when it comes to languages that you will always find someone who can help you out. I'm
just gonna pick up on that real quick as well, because for me, learning languages, I think it's really interesting and important to learn the language of the country when you're visiting a specific country, because I feel like learning languages always opens doors. And I know 5 languages myself, but would you think that Luxembourgish language is dying?
It's not, because very recently they actually came up with a proper grammar and a proper way for people to learn it. Because before, the only people who would, basically know Luxembourgish were the ones who would grow up speaking it at home and speaking it with their friends and families. But now, with so many people coming, they also came up with ways to teach those people the language. And it's actually a requirement, for instance, to get a citizenship. It's a requirement to work in government jobs. So you have incentives for Luxembourgish, and there's actually more Luxembourgish speakers now than ever before. But of course, it's also changing, because they're kind of coming up with a grammar as we go. Because Luxembourgish, linguistically, like as a language, it's very close to German, but it has developed away from German in the past 100 years, with a lot of French words, with a lot of different rules when it comes to grammar and so on. So it's a bit of a mix too.
It's actually an invention.
It's more of a standardization. Like even to this day, every generation speaks and writes Luxembourgish in a different way. Some people don't even know how to write it because it has changed so much.
Are you taught how to write Luxembourgish at school?
I was not. Now you are. Because again, this is a very recent edition. They only came up with that, I think, 10 years ago. With the big official Luxembourgish grammar and orthography. So I didn't learn it, but I taught myself. I also worked as a Luxembourgish teacher for a little bit of time. But it's an ongoing process. So every year they come up with a few hundred words saying that these need to be changed. They need to be written differently.
Okay.
So it's quite funny.
Okay, can you teach me a Luxembourgish word?
Oh, can I teach you a Luxembourgish word? I think I already teach you some. What did we have last time?
Salut, ça geht?
How's it going?
How's it going?
Yeah. That's youth slang. Salut, ça geht, yeah. It's salut and then ça from French. How's it going? And geht from German or from Luxembourgish. Don't use that in the street. Or use that in the street. Depending on what kind of friends you want to make in Luxembourg.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Okay. Yeah. Then, to end up the interview, can you convince my listeners to visit Luxembourg by train? Like, say something that is promotion for your own country. Like, why should you visit Luxembourg by train?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to pull my tourist guide.
Yeah. Take your
charisma.
Put on your badge and pep talk me in.
If you're coming to Luxembourg, it's tiny. It's really tiny, but it's also fun because you can claim that you explore. You see most of the country from north to south in a single day by taking the train route running from the north of the country to the south. Although I would recommend you that you do it the other way around. So you start in the south, which is like, urbanized. You have these industrial regions, a lot of former industrial places. So it looks a little bit different. Then you get to Luxembourg City. It's all fancy. It's all history. And you have the European Quarter. You have a nice little skyline. And then you exit Luxembourg City and you get to the northern half of the country, and then you have these forests coming, you have beautiful little villages. It starts getting very naturey. So you get all of that within the scope of, let's say, 50 minutes, and you can get out at any point, especially in the north of the country, and explore one of the beautiful hiking trails. So it's really fun because the train line is really meant to enable you to do that.
Okay, so you definitely recommend people to come to Luxembourg by train?
Of course, yeah. And if you are here, make sure to take the first class.
Would that be a challenge? Because I was going to ask you, do you have a challenge for people who want to travel in Luxembourg? A specific challenge or task, like very specific. You can tell me maybe a city they should definitely see besides the city of Luxembourg, or a train, like you already talked about, like the north to south or the south to north road. But is there anything in particular that you would say like, oh, this is something you should definitely see when you're visiting Luxembourg? They may be here for a weekend or something. What should they definitely see besides the city?
Mm-hmm. What is really fun normally is if you take advantage of the small size of the country and you go to one of these border points where you have, triple border points, like tri-border crossing points. You have Germany, France, and Belgium on one side. For instance, Schengen. Schengen is also a Luxembourgish village, the most famous village in Europe. Sometimes they say, because of the whole visa policy and so on, the agreements that were signed there. And there, it's beautiful because you have vineyards everywhere. And then you actually have a hiking trail through the vineyards, going into France and then to Germany and then back to Luxembourg. So I'm not sure how much more European it can get. So it's quite fun to do that. I would definitely recommend that.
Nice recommendation. We should do that as well.
Yeah, next time.
Next time. Okay, thank you so much. Now I want to end with some fire questions I ask all of my guests.
Ooh, I see.
Okay. These are a couple of questions. You have only a few words to answer these questions, okay? Mm-hmm. So to start off, how old are you now?
30 from today.
Today is your birthday. I'm asking this question.
It is, the biggest gift she could give me, a podcast episode.
Exactly. How old were you the first time you traveled to another continent?
I think 7 years old. Yeah, 7 years old to Turkey. Sounds about right.
Okay. What's the longest time you've been away from home?
When I went to Germany, sometimes I did not want to come back for a long time. So I think 8 to 9 months is my maximum.
Okay. Would you rather see a lot of places or get to know one really well?
I like to stick around in one place for at least several days or weeks to really get a good sense of what it's like.
Yeah. Would you rather save money on accommodation or pay for a good bed?
I think my bank wants me to pay for a good bed.
With the Luxembourgish salary, you can afford it.
Sometimes. Depends on where you go. As long as it's not Luxembourg. Because beds in Luxembourg are quite expensive.
Okay. What word would you teach a foreigner which is trying to learn your language?
Kaffeeschulchen.
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 See, because that word is very fun to teach because Luxembourgish is a mumbling language. And Kaffeeschulchen means squirrel.
For some reason, I already thought... It sounds a little bit like the German word Eichhörnchen.
Eichhörnchen, yeah.
It's also difficult to pronounce.
Yes.
And then you have Luxembourgish Kaffeeschulchen.
Kaffeeschulchen, yeah.
Okay. What can't you travel without? What you always need when you're traveling?
I need my phone, for sure.
Okay.
Should I say Akku? I need Akku.
Your girlfriend.
Yes.
You always need your girlfriend, okay.
I always need my girlfriend to travel with me.
I
always need the newest episode of Travel Devil.
Oh, thank you for the promo! Okay. What's your favorite travel song?
I
know it's a tricky one.
That is very tricky. But there's a new song that I keep listening to that while traveling. It's Yam Yam by Lalalar. It's a Turkish song.
Okay.
It's very nice.
I will add it to my Spotify playlist that I'm making. I can also link this in the show notes. Mm-hmm. Now, my last question, Joé. Why do you travel?
To taste new food, to meet new people, and to learn more languages.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Clara.
Thank you for being on Travel Devil. Thank you for being in this episode. Are there any more important informations that you think my listeners would need? Any links you want to share? Then I will put them in the show notes.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever travel to Luxembourg and you decide to, take a quick gander in the south, take a quick trip to the south of the country, you can always hit me up and I'm going to give a tour, because that's one of my favorite things to do. Okay, hit you up. So where can my listeners find you? You have LinkedIn. Okay. I'd say LinkedIn is probably the best. Yeah. To get some, or Travel Devil. Just write the Travel Devil. Okay. It's also a travel agency now. From now on. From now on, I'm a travel agency. Okay, yeah, great. Big fees in between them. Thank you so much for thank you, Clara, being here. This was Travel Devil, brought to you by me, your host, Clara Francken. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to continue the conversation or suggest any future guests, you can go to my Instagram, @Clara Francken. Take care, and I will see you next Thursday.